Hello, everybody. Welcome to Maria. Is this mic working? Can you hear? Hello. I know. Can you hear it? Can you hear it? Right underneath. Oh, I've only done that 100 times in my life. That was just a little. Anyway, hello, everybody. Welcome. Good to see you. This is our, can you believe this is our final TEK Park meeting for 2019? We don't meet in November, December. It seemed like we just had this conversation yesterday. Anyway, so glad you're here tonight. And we will resume our activities the last Tuesday of the month in January of next year. And we'll be announcing that lineup. We're working on it now. We'll be announcing that soon. We have a full agenda for tonight. I just wanted to mention, in addition to one upcoming event I wanted to mention for sure is our book discussion that's coming up on Thursday, November 14th. There's more information about this on our website, and it's called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, and the meeting is on Thursday, November 14th at the Kutztown Community Library from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. It would be their book club. The book discussions are really interesting. No pressure, good way just to have a good, interesting conversation with a group of like-minded folks. If you're interested in joining us, that would be great. We're also, as you can see, we're working to get on it with recording our meetings so that they can be more readily shared with other people who couldn't always make it tonight. So we had a successful recording last month with Dr. Manns. It's available on our website and on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel, do you believe that? If you want to check that out. And we're also recording tonight's meeting. So that's it for the announcements. We have a really full house of interesting talkers tonight. So we have a lot of interesting projects to talk about. So we wanted to have a good flow of a variety of information. So we're going to ask each speaker to stay to about 7 minutes. Ray has got the cue cards to help us make sure we stay on track. And then we're going to, so that we have time for some questions and answers and so that everybody gets to have their say. I just want to say, too, that some of the speakers have provided more slides than they're probably going to be able to get to in the 7 minutes. And so assuming that the speakers are all good with it, their full slide decks will be available for reference on our website later. Okay? All right. So let me I have a few slides I wanted to talk through. Anything I want to point out here, see our email address, hello@themaria.org. If you have any questions about anything you see tonight in this presentation or the presenters and want to try to reach somebody, just drop us a note at that line and we'll help you get connected with whatever information you're seeking. Okie doke. I also wanted to point out quickly the Maria website. So this is our website. If you don't go there often, we keep all of our current activities on the homepage, and there's a section here called Go Solar. And if you go to the Go Solar, you'll see there's a list of resources. We try to work hard to keep this up to date. And there's a lot of tools and resources, including our directory of qualified Pennsylvania solar installers. And that's a free download, and it's got a lot of information about the kind of services they offer, the areas they serve, and direct contact information. And that our directory has become kind of like the recognized one statewide. A lot of the state agencies use it, and other third parties point to it as the directory for solar installers. So, welcome. And it's one of the tools there, and this is my little quick tidbit to share about solar. I'm going to talk about one of the tools that's listed in the resources here. So this is the solar at our house that was put in 2012. And you can see that's when I used to mow the lawn. We don't mow the lawn anymore, and it's much nicer now. See the background here? This is how it looks these days. And once you get used to it, it's really much nicer. But what I wanted to show is this particular mounting system. You can see how Bill Hennessy was the installer built here. And he kind of talked us into this setup, this monopole setup with the single poles and the group of modules. And it was nice because, amongst other things, it made it so the ground is still useful underneath. The vegetation is all happy and thrives underneath there just fine. And it also has this added option of being able to tilt the modules manually if you want. So you can see there's this little bolt right here, and you just pull that out, and then it's pretty easy to pivot it around here, and you can make it steeper or flatter depending by shifting this bolt up and down. So I do it twice a year. I just need a second set of hands, Bill or a neighbor or somebody to help with the push and pull. But it's easy to do. It just takes a few minutes. But what I wanted to show you, so you might say, is that worth it? How big a deal is it? Tilt is always a question with solar about how much does it matter where the tilt is? Is it worth the extra effort to do that? And so PV Watts is one of the free resources that is available through we have a link to that through our solar resources page. And it's an online tool that's very handy for checking out and doing like some scenario testing. So you just go to it and you put in your location. So in this case, Green Lane, Pennsylvania is our location. It determines the most local weather data available. And then you tell the software a few basic parameters about your system, the size of the system, and then you can click on any of these eyes for information about what the factors are. And then you give it the tilt and you give it the azimuth. That's the direction, north, south, south, southeast, southwest. And you specify that by degrees. And then the software spits out, based on long-term data for your area, how much electricity you can expect that solar installation to generate during each month of the year. So based on those factors I just put in there, it's telling me this is how much electricity that particular solar installation would generate on average, on long-term average, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, for each month of the year. And that would be the total for the year. So you can use this to check out different things. So in my case, I wanted to see what would be the best angles? How could I get the most year-round generation if I was going to change my tilt twice a year, if I were going to change it twice a year? So I just ran through that data at a 0, only thing I changed was tilt, 0, 20, 40, 60, 90 degrees. And I saw if I left it at 1 tilt year-round, that would mean I would get the greatest average generation, almost 13,000 kilowatt hours. And then I did subtotals. If I just looked at the months of April to August and September to March and what were those totals, then I realized, and I did various different scenarios to see which windows would work best, but I could improve. The best I could come up with was to change my tilt, and have it in the summer months at 20 degrees and in the winter months at 60 degrees. And that would be it. If I did it just right, at exactly right time, I could get my generation, my long-term average up to over 13,000 kilowatt hours, about a 4% increase. So that answers the big question about how much does it matter how steep my roof is or how steep my roof isn't. But this ability to test scenarios in PV Watts is also helpful if you're now using microinverters and you're putting them on different planes. So you can also look at it, you can design your small, you can look at how this one group of modules, it's on this particular part of my roof, at this particular tilt, and this particular orientation, how much it's going to generate. Then you can look at another part of my roof, what is it going to generate? And so you can use PV Watts to do rough, good estimates of different generation across different kind of scenarios. And it's an easy, free, helpful tool, and it's available on our website. So that was my spiel. And then I just really wanted to show you this picture. Is that great? I walked out the other day and I took that with my phone. And that was a hawk sitting right on the edge of our solar and the sun shining through. I think it likes us not cutting the grass too. All right, that's the end of me. Who's next? I say Bill Zimmerman. Is that the first one? Okay. You'll just go in reverse order.
Clumsy.
Just use this brush. Right?
Just use this. Okay.
Okay, I'll be right with you.
Hello. Like a lot of people, I wanted solar panels in the worst way, but I realized that shading would probably preclude that. Then the microinverters came along, and I said, well, I'm all for that. Ironically, between the time that I decided to go with microinverters and when they were installed, tree surgeon told me that these arborvitaes by the side of my house should be cut down by 1/3. He said, because those things that come down, they're so darn tall and thin. And he said, they'll grow out and they'll be healthier. And he was right. So I have my system installed. And what I found was that, it was going great, comparing to the production, the PV watts, I was getting, I think, overall about 104, 105% of projected. So, you know, I was quite happy. But after about 3 years, I started experiencing failures. I had 30 microinverters and 34 replacements. Now, the company backed up the inverters. For 3 or 4 years, they even paid for the reinstallation, and then they said, no, we'll send you the new inverters. You know, we guaranteed them, but it's up to you to get them installed. So that was something to deal with, but I kept doing it. And they came out, it's in-phase inverters. They came out and they said, we've got a legacy upgrade program where you can replace all of your inverters and we'll give you a reduced price on them. And we'll throw in the cabling, we'll throw in the new Envoy, which is the control device that they use. So I opted to do that. Now, one of the things, or two things that influenced that decision. One, I realized this whole thing's going to be dead before 15 years is up. And the other thing is, you know, I've been tracking the in-phase inverters on other systems that Bill Hennessy has installed. And the newer 215 version, the next generation, they're dependable, they work. So again, figuring that they're going to not go, you know, that they're going to continue to be good, I'll just go along and I'll get the upgrade. So I did, I had them put in and they're working just fine. Now, I know that I looked at the history, and for the first, looking at June 4th through October 26th of this year, I picked up, it was 4.187 megawatts, that would be. Yeah. And for the same period 7 years ago was 4.182. I mean, they were so close, it was almost like it was rigged. But that's actually an improvement. Let me see if I can. Yeah, what do I do to get forward? Close.
Oh, excuse me. I'm helping.
That's an inverter. You can see a real one over there. Vera brought in a similar model, a 215. This is what I wanted to show you. What I'm seeing is a couple of things. Like I am making good energy, satisfied with the new inverters. They're producing at the same level they used to when everything was brand new. Now, this is actually an improvement. And I'll tell you why. Those panels are 8 years old. So you could reasonably expect maybe a 5% degradation on them, but they're still putting out. And something else that you might see if you were to look on this, it's not going to expand. You can see that the shading is starting to come back on these panels in the lower right. So I'm going to have to get those trees trimmed, and that's about it. Okay.
You done?
That's it, yeah.
A question before you go away. What were the inverters that you switched up to? What were they called?
Everything is in phase. The original ones were the first ones, the 190s, and then they replaced them with 215s. And Vera brought one in. She had one that failed, but I think that's the only one you ever had fail, wasn't it, Vera?
No, I
Had a few?
had
Oh.
I had 4.
Boy, now you tell me. Well, anyway, it seemed that the 215s were more reliable, and that's why I took a chance on getting their newest inverters, it's called an IQ7, and I have no idea what that means, but I think they're convinced that they've got to continue to improve this because it costs them a lot to replace these things. I mean, the first 4 years, they were replacing these things left and right, and you know, I wasn't paying anything. It was all on them. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you, Bill.
That's in the middle.
Sorry about that. Okay, and you can just use that arrow right there to
Right
go.
there?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'll make it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kurt Reinhardt. I practiced this a couple times at home, and it was taking me like 12 minutes. So I feel like I'm in a democratic debate here. I'm going to have a card flashed at me that says your time's up. Anyway, I'm going to talk about two things tonight. I'm going to tell you what motivated me to go to solar, and then I'm going to talk about a little problem I had in the design phase of this. That if anybody here is thinking of building a solar home and putting panels on it, you'll probably have the same issue. So way of background, there's our house. That's the south-facing face of it. Basic design elements, the ranch on concrete slab. It's about 3,000 square feet, maybe a little bit shy of that. It points about 15 degrees east to true south. That lets a little nook where we have coffee in the morning warm up first, so it's a kind of a cozy place. We got 33 panels at 255 watts, so we have a 8.4 kilowatt array. We have a heat recovery ventilation system. The house is extremely tight. Every little perforation of the shell is caulked or sealed in some way. We got a heat pump, air to air for heating and cooling, 2 Mitsubishi units that work really well. And we collect the rainwater off the roof. We got about 4,000 gallons in 2,000 gallon cisterns, which pretty much stay full all the time, especially with kind of weather we've been having recently. A couple other items. Super insulated. We have 24 inches of blown-in cellulose in the attic over the ceiling, so we have an R80. Walls are SIPs, structural insulated panels with 6-inch urethane foam. That gives us an R40. And under the concrete slab, under the entire slab, 4 inches of styrofoam, so it gives us an R20. And the engineers tell me that you can lose most of your heat out of the edges of the slab rather than over the from the face that's in contact with the ground, which boggles my mind. I don't understand that, but I took their word for it. So we have 2 inches of foam along the edges. And then on top of all that, we have a vapor barrier to kind of keep the moisture from wicking up through the concrete. So why did I do it? Primarily, it was a financial decision. We were living in Maine at the time. We were having typical Maine winters. You can't really see it, but over, if I can get to a cursor. Well, I can't get to the cursor easily, but over to the right of that picture, there's a 6-foot stockade fence that was completely under snowdrifts. And this is classic old New England house, no insulation in the walls, maybe 4 to 6 inches of fiberglass in the ceiling. And that turned into 2 oil deliveries a week. It's really pathetic when you know your oil delivery guys by their first names. But at that point in time, I was burning through about $5,000 a year just in heating oil. So you're starting to understand why maybe it was a financial thing with me. So you can see there the lowest arrow. That's where we moved to Maine. That was somewhere around 2002. In 2005, there was some strange rumors online or in the news about oil prices doubling because of some Middle East crisis. And in fact, they did. So around 2007, 2008, this is crude prices. So that's like West Texas Intermediate and Brent. Luckily, that didn't translate into heating oil increases, but it put the fear of God into me, pardon my French, and I really started thinking seriously about what's the best way to avert this. That's what it feels like. So I knew I had to do something different. The light went on. The answer comes up every morning. About 6 years before we moved back to Pennsylvania, I got really interested in solar and renewable energy. Again, mostly from a financial perspective, but the more I got into it, the more exciting it got, and I've met just a wonderful group of people here, and I'm glad I made the change. So here's the problem. How do you know how many solar panels to put on your roof if you've got a brand new house, you've never been in it, and it's all electric? I didn't know where to start, but we were living in Mooresville, about 7 miles from where the current house is. So just quickly, here's a bill from Mooresville. This was in January of 2013, about 6 months before we moved into the new home. You can see we paid $83 for that electric bill. And that's kind of the usage. You can see down there, we were banging around between 300 and 700 kilowatt hours a month. And then I didn't know where to go from there. So I just picked the number out of the air. So I'm going to go with 600 kilowatt hours for the new house. Called in the panel installers and said, this is what I want. They said, okay, that'll be about 20 panels. So they went ahead and did that. So here is about January 2015. That's about 6-7 months after we moved in. $230 bill for 1 month. You can see that was a 2,500 kilowatt hour a month. And I thought, that's no good. If I get through 2 or 3, 4 months like that, I need to do better. So I called the panel guys back in. I basically waited a year and rolled up all the money and said, how many more panels do I need to offset that? And they said, 13 more will do it. I said, put them on. So here is a bill from March of 2017, about a half a year again after they were installed. What does that say? 110, 111. So that's kind of a typical year now. You see in the summer, there's low usage. In the winter, it spikes up. And then what it boils down to is 8 months out of the year, that's my bill. At this point, I get a $9 bill. And then I'll have 2 or 3 bills in the winter that maybe go 100 to 150 dollars a month. That's it. That's my pitch. Thank you. Any questions?
Are you going to add a little more?
No. I'm done.
Battery storage?
Yeah, I considered that, but it was like, question was, did I consider battery storage? And I did, but I like the convenience of using the grid as my battery and not having to worry about maintaining batteries and, you know, maybe replacing them in 10 or 12 years, whatever their life is. So I went with just grid tied. Yeah.
You bought the house, the contractor did all the work?
Yes.
You bought the house?
I did the floor plan and put in all the, or designed all the systems and gave him the details, and he drew up the plans and built it. No, he actually had tried to sell a solar home in like 2008, right at the crash, and couldn't sell it. But he was always interested in it, so he came when we walked in about 6 years later. He just lit up and said, "Yeah, I'd love to do that." I use a heat pump, air to water heat pump, hot water heater. Yep, it's in my shop, and the wonderful side effect is it air conditions my shop in the summer because it's pulling the heat out of the air and putting it into my water. Ray.
You're actually net zero, so you end up paying to Med Ed just your connection.
Right. Yeah, that's that $9 bill. That's just all their nickel and dime little charges. I'm not true net zero because I have those couple of months in the winter where it may be $100, $150 bill. Right. Thank you very much. They don't. They credit you and they write that off the next month's bill. Yes. Oh, the question was, what does the utility company pay me when they owe me? And my answer was, they don't do that. They kind of keep a bank account of how many you've created more than you've used, and then they net that off of the bills where you've used more than you've generated. Right. As far as I know. Bill might.
No, I guess, and we'll talk about that later. We just had a person that got burned for several $100 because they switched to an alternative provider that was, bringing in a lower rate. And it took them a while to figure out that Net PPL, you only get the net metering credit if you stay with them and you do solar. Okay. It's optional, but it's not the way the laws, the rules are.
Can I add?
Yeah, we can talk about it later. We'll let it's something to really watch.
Let me just add a little context for anybody that where this may be new. So this whole idea is when you generate more electricity than you're using, you send it back to the utility companies. and then you get credit for it, and that credit rolls over. The policy for managing that is called net metering. So if you want to understand the rules for that, it's net metering policy. You can read about it online, and it applies to, as Bill was saying, it only applies to the big utility companies, the only ones that are required to do net metering. And so if you shop for electricity, you're giving up your guaranteed rights for the way those net metering rules work. Okay? Yep.
Thank you.
Take care. This is fun. It's like speed dating. All right, Mark. Hang on just a second. Slideshow. Okay, you can just use that little arrow right there. Yep, and I'll be right here if you have any questions.
Okay, I'll give you a little story of how my passion kind of led into this through circumstances in our family, being able to put solar panels on our house. So growing up in the 70s, I did the newspaper drives with the Cub Scouts and collected bottles to recycle. I thought we should use solar more often, but it wasn't as feasible back then. My values came from my parents. They were born into the Depression, lived through World War II rationing, so they only bought what was truly needed and didn't waste. So from that, I learned to make good use of what we have. As my Christian faith matured in my 30s, I started to believe that all we have comes from God. So that passion of reducing waste kind of transitioned into being a good steward of our resources out of gratitude for what God has given us. And with that transition, I was always also experiencing transitions in my employment. So 3 jobs ended in 8 years. So I said, let's follow my passion. And I looked for opportunities in the sustainability. So I wasn't actually thinking about solar panels, even though I was looking at sustainability, until the day we had a roof put on our house. And actually, as the guys were pounding those shingles in, Solar City calls and says, hey, would you like to put free solar panels on your house? So the reason they were free is because they had a power purchase agreement. So Solar City would install the panels on your house at no cost, and you would get a lower rate for your electricity. So the reason we were putting the roof on is we had an inheritance from my father's estate. So we said we ought to look for some other options for this. It sounds like a good idea. So we went in and looked for some additional proposals. In the process of doing that, we started to think about, hey, is there other stuff that we can convert to electricity? So we looked at our electric bill, fuel for our 2 cars, and oil for our furnace. And we found out that was averaging about $5,000 a year, or roughly $100 for each one of those items. So quickly realized that if we wanted to get the solar panels, we could have a payout a little quicker if we started converting these things to electric. I knew nothing at the time about electric vehicles. As I started looking into it, I saw that the technology was rapidly improving so that they would be better than gas vehicles shortly. So that convinced us that when our 15-plus-year-old high-mileage cars died, we would replace them with electric vehicles. And now the other question, kind of like Kurt faced, is how many solar panels do we put on now? And the electric vehicles, we could kind of calculate a little bit. The heat, we really couldn't. So we just ended up making the jump in October 2015. We pretty much filled up our roof with as many solar panels as we could almost. 10.15 kilowatt system, 35 panels. And that was built bigger than our current needs at the time. Were about 20 kilowatt hours a day. Now, I had a passion for sustainability. I also had a lifelong dislike for this style of house with its asymmetrical roofline. I like things symmetrical. But it turned out we wanted to stay in Malvern, and this was pretty much the only house that we could afford at the time. So little did I know that 15 years later, this house with 2/3 of the roofline facing south would be so ideal for my passion to put solar panels on. So it worked out really well. As others had shown, there's software that'll show you how much your solar panels are producing. And then I downloaded information from the PICO website. So as I mentioned, the system was built bigger than we needed. So you can see there where the lines go below the horizontal axis, we're actually sending electricity back to the PICO. It was actually over 40 kilowatt hours a day some days back in that first couple years. So step 1 was putting the solar panels on. Step 2 was adding the electric vehicle when our first car died. So we got a Nissan Leaf in October 2017. Now, I guess be careful what you wish for, because then 8 months later, the other car died. So it's a little sooner than I was hoping. I was hoping that we would have some time to maybe wait till the Bolts and some other high-range electric vehicles came on the market off lease, but we didn't have that option. So we looked at the plug-in electric with gas range extending engines. The Volt offered 40 miles of range, which would just cover my daily commute I had at the time, still have, and also had a gas range extending engine for longer trips. So we went with that. Now, with the standard 124 volt outlet, it wasn't too hard to charge up the Leaf overnight, even though you only get 5 miles of charge per hour. Now with 2 electric vehicles, it was a little bit more difficult keeping them both charged up on some days. So I decided to embark on a project to install a charging station. Since the service panel's on the back wall of the house, that meant running the 50 amp line across the laundry room ceiling, over the drop ceiling in the family room, out the side wall, down into a trench under the sidewalk, and then 30 feet out to the driveway. And then halfway down the driveway, I could charge the car in either position. And with the new charging station, we can charge the Leaf in, add 30 miles or more in an hour and charge the Volt in under 4 hours. So now with the 2 EVs, we don't have that huge surplus that we used to have, but I don't go to the gas station that often. So this year I'll probably put 7 tanks of gas in the Volt all year. And that includes a trip out to Pittsburgh and Ohio for college visits. That was 3 of our tanks of gas right there. And also we're looking at other stuff. So when I got a chipper and then we got a rechargeable lawnmower for those times when the grass was too high for my rotary. So we're using that now. So SRECs were something that wasn't really part of our equation to buy solar panels, but lately with the Pennsylvania borders opening, or closing actually, you can see that last year we're getting over $30 SREC. So now it's part of the payback. So the payback, as I mentioned, $10 a month for those things. So electric's about $100, $1,200, the fuel for the 2 cars, taking out the gas purchases for the Volt, and then adding in SRECs, we're looking at about $3,600 of savings, cost avoidance savings a year. Looking at the total cost, our net cost was $22,600 after the tax credit. So at that savings rate, we'll pay back the panels in about 7 years. After that, it's pure savings, pure free energy. So the 3 takeaways I had from this, I like the idea of taking personal responsibility for meeting energy needs. So it kind of dawned on me, we've got like a little power plant up on our roof producing energy for us. You can reduce our fossil fuel use, and there's also a long-term reduction in our household expenses. That's it. No, we didn't. So that's the 4th step. So we'll probably do a heat pump. I don't know if it'll be worth doing the geothermal. That would be the ideal, but a family of 3, we don't use air conditioning a lot in the summer, so with a shade tree in the back. So we'll see. They're DC optimizers on there. So it's a Winneco panels. I'm sorry, the type of inverter, it's a DC optimizer. So Solar Edge, right, and the Solar Edge monitoring system. Yeah, we have had a DC optimizer fail, and it came out, and those are under warranty, so under a certain time we'll get those replaced. So,
Did you install those yourself?
not the solar panels, no. No, I'm not going to touch the solar panels. The charging station I was able to do myself, except I had a friend that comes over and does the work on my service panel and help me drill the walls. But it was a long project, but my wife appreciates the fact that we can just add 30 miles of charge in an hour in the the Leaf when she uses that. So it's a nice peace of mind there. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Matt.
You can go to the next one, too.
Here, go to this.
My workshop's getting worked on, that's why it looks so bad. I'm glad Mark went before me because they seem to have all these brand new systems. I put this in 2010. It's a 3.5 kilowatt
a system installed in 2010 by Bill Hennessy and Burke Solar. I've made 39 megawatts, 39,836 kilowatt hours until now. When I first put it in, well, you can see I don't have the microinverters. That's actually a GE inverter. It was rebranded to PV powered, I think it was, and I think I have GE cells that were made in Delaware. That was, it cost me $23,000 back in 2010. I got $13,000 back in rebates. I got $7,000 back from the PA Solar Sunshine Fund. I got a federal tax credit of $6,000. So nets, I'm out of pocket $10,000. Before I get into the money, how do I get to the next slide? Or if you can go back one. So I took a picture of the solar cells and I was looking at them and they used to be all nice and blue and shiny. And now after 8 years, I saw like a black film on top of them. And I was under the impression that in Pennsylvania, you don't have to wash your solar cells. California, you do because it's all dusty and it never rains. Well, that was 5 days after the deluge of 1 inch we got over the weekend. So I decided to wash my solar cells. So I went up on the roof with my simple green and my bucket and a long handle and my hose, and I scrubbed and I got some brown suds, came off of them. And I took this picture 2 days ago, Sunday, and they looked the same as they did before. So I saw dirt come off of them. So I'm gonna go up again and try and see what happens. And unfortunately, I don't have any like pre and post solar data. It actually, if it's the guy any more efficient or not. So financially, so like I said, 23,000, I got $10,000 out of my pocket. And at the time, 2010, that was about 40% of my electric use. We live in a 210-year-old stone farmhouse and electric washer and dryer. So, and then that probably was it took the most. But at the same time, we started using CFLs and LEDs came out and things like that. And now the numbers I crunched tonight, we're using 50% of our power. And like 5 years ago, I added a Chevy Volt, which is actually $1 a day. And we were still at 50%. So November, this is off the PP&L website. And like I said before, I applied this PP&L for my net metering for my system. They approved it. And I figured I better stay with them because I don't want nothing to happen. So off the PP&L website, November 17 to October 2018, I used 8,527 kilowatt hours. November 2018 to October 2019, I used 8,200 kilowatt hours. So I'm using an average of 8,300 kilowatt hours a year from PP&L. So, and then adding about 4,000 for this year, I figured I used 78,850 kilowatts hours since I put my solar cells up. And I made 39,836, so that's 39,000 kilowatt hours that I got from PP&L. So it's almost exactly 50%. Back in the day, I remember seeing PP&L had it up to 9 cents a kilowatt hour. I looked online today and they said compare at 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So I was going, I'm going to use 8 for my process. So using 8 cents per kilowatt hour, I saved $3,000 from January 2010 to now. So, and then now the solar RECs, renewable energy credits. 2010, I got over $125. I might make 4 RECs a year, which is like 4 megawatts. I got over $125 the first year, maybe 2, and then it went down. The bottom fell out. I was getting $25 a year. And this time I got a $38 payment about 2 weeks ago from Knollwood, the aggregator. So I know they're going back up. So I figure over 20 years, I'm going to get about $1,400 for my SRECs at the current rate. So 10,000 minus $1,400, that's $86 out of pocket in 20 years. So you do all the math at 8 cents a kilowatt hour. I'm going to need to make 107,000 kilowatt hours to break even. And that if you divide that by the amount of months it's going to take me, it's about in 21 years, I'm going to get free electricity. So that's 2030 is when my solar cells are going to break even. The warranties are like 20, 25 years. The cells last about 25 years. So financially, it's not going to make me a whole lot of money or anything like that. But I'm saving all the carbon footprint. I'm an electrical engineer in America. I should be able to make my own power. That's our right. And I think the reason why it's not as cost effective as it should be is because those are on a 30-degree inclination, got a fixed roof, and it's sort of not optimized for the summer. And my inverter could actually take 3 more solar cells, solar panels, but that's at the time, this is all the money I had, so that's as big a system I got. It was all pure cost driven. That's it.
I think the price for electricity that you use might be a little low.
That's
Did you
all I
look at
thought
your
too.
bill?
Yeah, I did, and
Yeah.
it's hard to tell between their generation and they have the Senator TIG and all that kind of stuff, and they have all kinds of fees and all. But
Yeah.
but the words that said compare it at 7.5
The
cents.
price to compare is basically the generation if you're going to shop for another generator. It doesn't
Yeah.
include all the other costs
Yeah.
that you wouldn't be paying, but it is strict.
But back
But
in
I
the
just, you know, I just,
it was always 9 cents or 9 cents, 10 cents. That
yeah. Pretty quick.
yeah.
I just wanted to say your financial picture might not be quite that.
Yeah. But that's not the reason.
That's it. I hear you. I love your site. I've been there a couple times on our solar tours. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Wes. Yeah, there we go. Okay, that little arrow right there is to go down.
Okay.
Glow in the dark.
Oh boy, if I can only see what I'm reading here. Hi, I'm Wes Loader. I'm here with Linda. We've lived off grid for 10 years now, and actually longer than that. And talk about what's happened in the last 5 years, particularly. We broke ground in August of 2007 with our house. We had bought property about 3 or 4 miles from here with the idea of building a passive solar off-grid home, and moved in February 2009. And we spoke here, we gave a solo presentation here about 5 years ago. So what I want to cover here briefly is what's happened since that last 5 years. And if you have questions here about how well has it worked, what have we learned, what would we do differently if at all, and what changes have we made? So what changes, additions have we made since when we spoke here? We added a small tool shed for our garden to hold the lawnmower and other outdoor equipment. And you notice it now has an electric mower in it when our gas mower died. We took out a whole bunch of sticker bushes to the west and converted that to grassy area beyond the panel for our well, and fenced in an area for additional garden. And we built a castle for our grandchildren. The house itself has seen little change. Some things that have happened, our Sunfrost refrigerator, the manufacturer's gone out of business. We still are only using about 80 pounds of propane a year. That's our only expense, basically. We recently replaced the glycol in our hot water system, And our hot water system has given us, our water system as a whole has given us the most trouble over the 10 years, where we've lost several well pumps and controllers, partly due to lightning strikes, pinched wires, and other little systems like that. When it works great. When it doesn't. The biggest change over the last 5 years that we have noticed has been climate change. It's something that we have no control over, but I'm sure everybody here has noticed that our climate in Pennsylvania is changing. For one thing, it's the summers are getting a lot hotter than we had designed our house for. We started coping here. We started making a canopy on our deck to shade the center part of the house, and we put it in. Of course, it increases the utility of the deck. We added overhangs to the lower windows to block the high summer sun to a large extent. West side windows, which were put in originally for ventilation because we tend to have breezes from the west, we run into problems there with getting sun soaked from the west, and we put in these basically insulated panels, the reflective side, the outside in the summer, and the inside in the winter. And we're actually thinking of putting exterior shutters on that we would close that would allow ventilated shutters to let the air go through, but would block the west sun in the summer months. We've used fans extensively inside for the summer for a number of years. And last year, we actually went out and bought an air conditioner, God forbid, and put it in the window. And actually have used it. This summer, we used it maybe 3 or 4 days. So it's not something we really know about that. The other problem now, in terms of winter type of problems that we've had, for one thing, our hot water panel does a great job. But we've had several winter days where we have had like 4 or 5 days without any sun, and the tank did not store enough hot water to get it through there. We installed an on-demand hot water heater, propane operated. It's off most of the time, but when we need it, we can turn it on. The other thing is of course, is less sun, is that our power system is more often with the yellow light than we used to have. I think that what this does, we still haven't reached the point where we needed a generator or additional power, but we do get a lot more cautious in January and December with how much we use it. So, off the grid, still working for us, still enjoying it. I would say that it's something that has worked out extremely well for us. We basically, what we have provides all our needs. And what do we do? What does it require of us to do? How is it different? Question asked, how is it different from a grid-tied house? And my answer is not much. We cook what we want, shower when we need to, use computers whenever we need to. Our house is small, but offers both shared and private space. Our house is about 1,300 square feet. We check battery level and do equalization of the batteries on a regular process. We live with an increased awareness of the weather, temperatures, and sun. We mark the seasons. It brought us closer to the land and to the earth. We're constantly aware, not worried, but aware of our power and hot water usage. We try never to waste power. We don't need light or appliance, we turn it off. We feel that this is not a constraint, but a strength for it forces us to maintain a level of self-control. Excuse me? We have another small panel for the well pump. Yes, 1.2 kilowatt. Oh, I picked the day I do it. That's, we equalize every other month, and I got a good sunny day, that's the day, and I'll equalize. It takes, it's pretty short. You go out in the morning, you check the battery level, the water level on all the batteries, put on equalizer, a couple hours, you come back down, take it out of equalization, check the water level again, you're done. It doesn't take that long.
Now, you've had the battery system since 2007?
2009 is when we put the batteries in, yeah.
And how has it worked out? Has it had any problems with the battery system?
No, the batteries are guaranteed for 8 years, but it's already been 10. Yeah. No, they're in our basement in a box. It has a ventilation pipe built in, designed that way.
How big a battery bank? How many batteries?
24 volt. There's 4 Rolls Threat batteries, and each one is 6 volt. So the 4.
Running an air conditioner off an inverter?
No, we don't have any access to any sort of external electricity.
Running an AC air conditioner, 120?
Yeah,
For how long?
a couple of hours. On sunny days. You don't need an air conditioner in cloudy days. Yeah. Any other questions? That's okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Lee.
Okay, if that's in your way, ever let me know, and here's your arrows for me to
Okay.
put down, okay?
All right. Well, this is a system that I built, and I did it myself with help from my friends. The blue are polycrystalline. There's 55 of them, and they're 235 watt, and there's 5 additional at the end. I had room at the end for another column of panels, and we got a car that we could charge, and we were using it. So I added 5 more panels of 300 watt panels. It's all micro invertered. They're N-phase 250s, and the black ones are monocrystal. So there's a difference in that, but it's not much of a difference. I started out, somebody suggested a book, and this is a book that I used, and it was my design guideline, and I read that, and that's how I designed the system. In the appendix, there's 2 pages. You start out with your annual electrical usage, and from that, you work your way down with all the subtractions for efficiency and stuff, and you get to the point where you know how many watts you need to produce a year, and you look in a chart and see what kind of panels are available and what you're going to buy, and that tells you how many panels you're going to need. And from there, I was able to go to, oops, okay. Yep. This is from that same book. It tells you that in the US or anywhere, the array, if it's a ground mount array, should be facing true south as opposed to magnetic south. So that chart on the left tells you the degrees of declination for your location that you're different from true south. In other words, if you get a compass and hold it up and it says this is south, it turns out that here in Allentown or this area, true south is 13 degrees west of magnetic south. And also, as Vera said, you can look at summer loads and winter loads and what they should be to get the maximum yield. Well, I had chosen that I wasn't going to have a tiltable system. I wanted to have a fixed array and didn't want to have the hassles of moving it at different times of the year. And under those circumstances, the correct tilt angle is equal to your latitude, and in Allentown, that's 40.653. So that's the way I set up the system. And there's the chart that also shows that for Allentown, we're going to have an average of 4.4 hours of celerity per day, and that's the average hours of sun per day. So the system and that original two-page flow chart is based on 4.4 hours of sun per day. I was subscribing to a magazine called Home Power, and it was a good magazine, had lots of good articles. It's no longer available in print. It's only available online. One of the ads in it was for the Aldi store. So based on the calculations from that flow chart, I talked to them, and they said, oh, why don't we give you a hardware list? So they gave me a hardware list, and I studied the hardware list and figured out what I was going to need and whether that hardware list was enough or whether I needed a few additional parts, and put down 30 grand and bought the system. That was the most difficult part. It turns out my property's very much on a slope, and trying to get that horizontal pipe up there on the top of a 20-foot pipe was difficult. The rigging of that was difficult. And we had 2 front-end loaders working on it and 4 guys, but we did, and nobody got killed. Weren't very many accidents, so that was different. You can look at it coming off of each panel. There's 2 wires. It's putting out DC current. The 2 wires can't be wired incorrectly because one of them's female and the other one's male. And going to the microinverter, the second picture over, the microinverter has the correct plugs. I don't have a pointer, but if you look up on the top, so that the male one plugs into the right side and the female one plugs into the its right side. And then the output from the microinverter is down on the bottom coming out, and that's a plug, and that also can't be wired incorrectly. So the wiring is pretty simple. Enphase sells the wiring, and it was really quite simple. It was pretty much idiot proof, but I don't think there's anything that's totally any idiot proof. The hardware is all pretty self-explanatory. Getting the building permits and getting the electrical permits was a little tricky. And also, when I added the additional 5 panels, I paid just as much for the electrical permits and the building permits for the 5 panels as I did for the 55. So it pays from that kind of aggravation to do it all at once if you can. There's a picture of the back. The panels are bolted onto the rails. There's 2 rails there. One of the things is that you had to assemble the panels onto the rails and then move the whole column of panels over so they were tight together. But you needed to be able to work and build them and have space to do it. So there was some rigging and use of come-alongs and things like that to sway the whole thing into position, but it worked out real well. That's the Enphase Envoy, and that's what talks to it through the internet. Every time the made-up sine wave goes through the 0 voltage position, it spits to the internet, and it comes in. So I have an output like this every 10 minutes or so. This changes, and I know how much the system is producing instantaneously all the time. And it gives me that convenience. I tend to watch it a lot. That's my phase 2 converter for level 2 charging. I bought that off the internet and installed it. It meant running some number 10 wire over. That's my Prius Prime, and we've put 26,000 miles on it. I've got an average mile per gallon of 96 miles per gallon on it. So figure the electricity is about half of the hybrid values. So it's saved quite a bit. And that's it. No, that was gross. My net was about 21 at that time. I didn't have the Pennsylvania credit. That was already gone, but the federal credit was 30%. 15. And I've produced, I think I just hit the 60 megawatt mark for the amount of power I've produced since 2016. And we do air conditioning and all the good stuff. So, but it's our choice.
One more thing, it was asked before, when MedEd nets out your credits at the end of the year, this year it was worth 11 cents a credit hour or a kilowatt hour for that. So what they do is in 1 month in May, they wipe out the balance that you accumulated
Just
in
arrow or
the previous year.
Those arrows
And
are the
they give you
easiest.
a credit for that amount that sits on your account. And that can be used for your monthly charge of $11.
Hey, everybody, I'm John. I'm going to talk about our solar system mainly, but I'm also a Volt driver and like some of you guys. And the benefit for the system has been to help power the car. So that's one of the main benefits that I bought it for. So this is a picture in the winter. Of course, we all have seen snow-covered solar. And I do, whenever I see this, I think it's really pretty, but it's no value. So I always go out there and I clean it off in the morning, like at dawn here, before it starts sunning, the sun comes out. My little project was, technically, here's some numbers for you. It's an 8 kilowatt system. It was done in 2012, and basically it's a kind of a standard large system, 32 panels and 255 watt solar world mono silicon panels. Basically, I chose a lot of the system parts here. They were made in America. I chose the Oregon-made panels, Power One inverters made in, I think, Arizona. I tried to keep it, American-made. I paid a little bit more for it, but my installer helped me do this. The Power One company was bought by ABB a few years ago, so they were actually a quite useful inverter to choose for this because one thing about them in the second line here, that each inverter has two MPP power, what do you call it? Trackers. So there's 4 inverters in my system of 32 panels, which is nice. Each of the lines on the system has its own inverter. The peak midday, I'm getting 8 kilowatts out of it, just like the nameplate says. Even in the winter, I'll peak and I'll clip on that because it's running so well. The best days, I'm getting 52 kilowatt hours. And the annual output is about 11 SRECs or 11 megawatt hours. Since I put it in, it's put out about nearly 80 megawatt hours, which is nice. It's been fully south facing. It's been the angles here. We talked about angles earlier. The lower is 35 degrees and the upper is 30. So it's right in the kind of a sort of sweet spot. It's not 40, but it's close enough. And this is on a shed, not my house. So what we did was we decided to do it in sort of a single face with the roof and the ground mount working together. And I didn't have to take up a lot of room elsewhere. I was thinking of doing this as a ground mount entirely, but why not try to make it a multi-purpose solution? Okay, inside the shed, the inverters, there's 2 inverters, a combiner box, and a little bit of a interior electricity for the shed. So there's a little breaker box on the far left next to the meter. The production meter is what I use to read for SRECs. And over there, this is I showed this to a few guys and said the electrical connections were done pretty well. I don't know what's good or bad, but this on the left side was done quite well. But on the right side, we have a problem. I'm going to talk about that here in a second. The second meter is going in. This is just during the construction. There's a combiner box, and all the wiring was done outside the house. And they didn't even go inside the house at all. So basically, they got in, they mixed it up in the combiner box, and the service to the house just drops down the way it was built. The on-off switch is near the meters, but this house connection is about 100 feet away from the shed. So there's a line underground from the house to the shed that is responsible for a little bit of voltage drop. So they have to run the inverters a little bit higher voltage than you would if they're on the house. So here's what it looks like straight on. It's just basically a nice, clean looking system. It doesn't really change the looks of the house. It's in the backyard. It's away from the neighbors don't really see it. Like I said before, it's 35 degrees lower and 30 upper. I could have gone with a mount that lets you alternate the angles, but it would have added some cost. And I tried to keep this quite low cost. I don't even have a meter, like an internal home tracking meter. I just trust the system. I don't even look at the output. Once in a while, every month or so, I'll check the dashboard on each of the inverters inside, and I'll click through the screens, and I'll see if the 2 MPPTs are producing the same on like at noon. And if they are, then I'm happy. Once in a while, I'll go out there and I'll clean. So I can get a brush or just some water, and I'll clean the lower 2 and the lowest of the top 2. I don't have a long enough reach to hit the top, so I do the best I can. I do get about 3 or 4 more % out of them once I clean them. One thing unique about this, there's a combiner box on the roof. I didn't like that, so during installation I said, don't do that. They routed the wire off the roof and patched that spot where that little white combiner box is on the roof. Here's the problem with the system I want to catch before the end of my talk. The issue was the installation of the combiner box I showed on the front of the house. So during rains, we were wondering why we're getting some rain and some water in the basement. It started to happen to us after the installation was done. And for a few rains, we just couldn't figure it out. Then I said, it must be something outside with this box. So we found that the combiner box had no caulking around these 2 entry points. Heavy rains would just pool on top of this box and go down. And so what happened was, inside the combiner box, in this hole, it would pool and go down into my home's electrical supply. Not good. You don't want that. So the 200 amp line was also a funnel. it was coming downstairs into the combiner box, through into the solar, into the base, switch box. So after a few rains and after a few trouble times, I called them up. I said, I got a problem here. So I found, I took some pictures. I found this hole. I found water in there, and I said, there's a problem. There's no weep holes. There's no holes in this box to drain any water out. The electrician who checked the system out didn't see it. The installers didn't think about that, and that was my problem. So basically, they replaced my home panel. During the replacement of that panel, I used my Volt to run my home office, and I used this kit from EV Extend to run wires to my home office, and I could work that day. But it took about 5 hours to replace that whole switch box, and it was done under warranty from the installer. So the same guy came out and inspected again. Had to pay another service fee for that. Had to get a permit to get the home box replaced, so it cost more. So the only thing the negative about the system was simply that the power has not gone up. We were expecting the grid power prices to go up since the installation, but they haven't. They've actually gone down. I'm paying about 2 or 3 cents less per kilowatt hour from the grid than I did in 2010, roughly. Pico has not gone up very much. because of the natural gas we have here in Pennsylvania. So, but the good things about the project, powers my Volt. It's a great hobby project. I enjoyed it. The Power One inverters, here's a little cute little story. The Power One inverters were good. I liked them a lot. So back when the company was Power One, I bought some stock in the company. The stock went up when they got bought up by ABB. So that kind of helped pay for the system. I also used some of that stock to donate to my son's college to install some charging stations for EVs. So I turned it into a win-win for two different things. So that's really it. That's my system. So. Okay, yeah, ITC is going to be starting to run out this year after December 31st. I think it's 4% lower. 20, so 4% less than you'll get if you start the system now. So if you're getting a system installed, start it before the end of the year. Have them drop equipment off at your house on the last day of the year so that it's started. And just, I don't know, Bill, do you have anything?
And it's 30% now, and there's a lot of back and forth about whether, as I understand it now, the residential, if you're a resident, you have to have your system completed by December 31st. If it's a commercial system, you can have it in process and be built. The residential has to be
Okay, I'm wrong then. So it has to be completed.
A lot of arguments
Yeah.
in the last few months about how you interpret the tax code.
Put into service or completed?
Yeah, it has to be, well, again, completed in service. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Like mine was
yeah,
done,
it's
but
more
took
than
2
just
weeks.
dropping off equipment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I get it. So I'm sorry. Yeah, so have your system completed in service by end of the year, which is it's pushing it if you start now. Yeah, with permits and everything else. Hey, Mark.
You have to have the final invoice be billed by it.
Okay. So effectively, pretty much if you're going for it, quick install, or you're going to get 26% next year. Okay. That's it. Oh, sorry.
2 questions. So you put it on your shed. Did that make it easier from a building permit?
No, my building permit was a pain. My township had no idea what solar was. I was probably the first or second in my township. They decided to come up with an arbitrary number for a permit cost of 25 cents per square foot for your solar system. I don't know what that's all about. It was like $400 for the permit to get that done. If it was on my house, it would be the same thing. It was per square foot. I don't know, what to say.
And my second question is, somewhere I heard that there's like a setback for the panels versus the edge of the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And your panels bridge the edge of the roof.
Yeah, it went over the edge, and there's no real problem on a system like this on a shed. But on a house, you probably would have a problem. Yeah, and so there may be some issues at your township. West Kelm down by Coatesville. So I'm in Pico territory, Chester County. Huh, 3. So you need a big old. That's that for firefighting, or is that for something else? You think? Yeah. Okay. Well, this is so that's it. But I thought about this a long time. I went to the Maria meetings or the fairs. The energy fair has been 2010 and 11. I did a lot of research before I did this.
That concludes our planned remarks. Did I miss anybody? Anybody have any more questions for anybody or anything they would like to add at this point? Yeah.
I have a question. Okay. With the geothermal system, the initial starting of the thing, it takes a bunch of power, then it drops off a lot. I was wondering if anybody who has a solar array has managed to deal with a geothermal system starting and running on battery. I'm not an electrician.
What you mean with the batteries, running it off batteries?
Well, I was thinking getting it on the rate, but it sounds like it's only 10,000, so many thousand. I need a bunch of energy to start the geothermal system. I'm wondering how anybody else is dealt with that situation. You're talking about the starting hours. Yes. You're talking like seconds.
Well, the difference, I would just add to that, if you're using grid power, there's no difference whether it comes from the grid or whether it comes from the solar. That when it gets tricky is if you're using batteries. if you're off grid and you're counting on your batteries for the startup power. Does anybody want to, is anybody doing that actually? But, and you're not using batteries. Yeah, right. Right. Is anybody in here using geothermal with batteries? Bill, did you want to add anything?
We installed a geothermal system with the battery a few years ago.
Were you able to nail down the power requirements to startup power?
Yeah, it depends on the inverter and what they would call the startup or surge capacity. And if the batteries themselves have enough that they can take the surge capacity. It's just something else you have to look at. But again, if you look at how much the geothermal actually draws, it's nothing that you would really want to say, okay, I want to do this all the time. You know, you're just going to have to really increase the amount of modules that you would have if you wanted to live off grid with the geothermal system. So again, you have to realize that you're going to get about half the electricity in the winter as you would in the summer. And so, you know, if your heating demands are really high, it's going to, in the summer, you're going to end up with a lot of extra electricity. And if you're off grid, you really have no place really to put it at that point. So really, going backwards to what Kurt was doing, saying, okay, if I can spend my money on reducing my heating load, by insulating, by sealing up the area, it's a lot of grunt work, if you would. You know, it's kind of boring and time consuming, but you can really save the bucks by going that way and saying, okay, I want to put in the geothermal.
Thank you.
I don't know, we got into.
Yes, right.
I was wondering, of all those that were presented, what is the highest rated panel in watts that has been installed? Are any of them over 300? Or are they all under?
I have 300,
You have 300.
but only the 5 that are new ones. Earlier, 55 panels for 235.
But at reasonable cost, 325 is available too, right now.
Yeah, the power densities have really come up over the years.
Yeah, so today we're regularly using 325 watt, 320 watt modules and 390 watt modules. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Process of looking at the system at my house. One of the contractors that have said the failure rate of this microinverter is 50%.
That's what Bill Zimmerman was talking about earlier. Where are you, Bill? Yeah. The anybody want to comment on the?
They have more problems. But mine, each one of my panels has a microinverter and through
Yeah, the early microinverters for several years, we did have some problems. It gave the industry a black eye. I never liked them. I still prefer module level inverting, but that's just a small part of the general.
Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us what you.
I'm Ben Zark, Belmont Solar. I install these systems a lot. Installing, I think some quick type systems this year, or larger systems. There's probably about 50 off-grid systems and 3 with both battery and grid type.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a component called an optimizer that I don't think any of the presenters mentioned. I was wondering if Bill might be the expert or.
No, somebody did.
Describe its use.
Yeah. Right. Mark had talked about his optimizers.
Right. I think the man sure it's going to generate heat, right? Can everyone hear me well? Okay. So there's three main options, and this is to the fine technical details. I prefer to design systems based around the needs, the person, and or the property. So you can get into the finer details of how to get to that end goal, which I try to optimize for every scenario. But there are string inverters, optimizer systems, and microinverters. String inverters are the simplest, most reliable, and in most cases, what I use. Not in quite all cases. Sometimes people prefer the added technical features of what optimizers or microinverters add. And optimizers are kind of like in-between solution. They have all the advantages of the microinverters with almost none of the disadvantages.
Shading. So we have shading in the apparatus, and that's why we have the optimizer.
If you do the full data, it's surprising how often that it's on equal footing.
Yeah, I was going to say my system, I have half of it's on string inverters and half is on microinverters, and it's almost exactly the same over time, the production. Yeah. The module level control is advantageous with the optimizers or the microinverters if you're going to be in different planes, or if you have shading issues or other kind of those kind of scenarios, or if a situation where you want to be able to add on and grow a system easy, right?
For example,
yeah.
I could show you multiple houses where there was maybe 3 panels on one way and 1/3 of them another way, and 2 other planes, and then it's microinverters or optimizers, usually optimizers.
Or a string inverter with multiple PowerPoint tracking.
Yeah.
In some cases, yeah. Like you said, every situation you could design something.
And what was true 10 years ago is not applying anymore.
Yeah.
Don't go by 10-year-old information or myths.
Yeah. Yes. I'm sorry, I think you guys, there's questions lined up right in a row there. Oh, the roofing tile question. Anybody want to comment on that? Bill, are you, Bill?
We had a young man work for us chemical in Midland, Michigan. They've been trying for years and years to report all kinds of money down on it, and we ended up selling this. Once it gets solar roofing, it's like a shingle type of thing. I think it's in its 3rd ownership now, and I think they're struggling. And it's a great idea, but putting it into practice is really hard. The modules are very inefficient compared to what you have now. Tesla started out with a big bang a couple of years ago, and they were going to do solar roofing. Just because of Tesla, they get an incredible amount of publicity and good vibes. They make a good car, they make good batteries, but they aren't doing squat when it comes to solar roofing. And yeah, it's just the implementation of it is really hard to put into practice.
It's the, I'm sorry. Let's take one more question as a group, and then everybody can hang out and we can chat informally. Did you have a question?
I was just going to make a comment.
Yeah.
I don't know about all the utilities, but PP&L, their net metering page is actually very good, and you can actually do really detailed study of your net metering right on their site. And it also
You're talking about the My PPL page? Yeah, I use it too. I agree. It's good data. Yeah.
And it also comments on the third-party generators. So third-party generators can be approved to read the net meters and refund money for overproduction on an annual basis, but they'll be approved and added to that site.
Oh, that's.
I don't think there's any yet, though.
Oh, okay. That was my next question.
Coming,
yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
in that they want to be able to read them. It's a competitive edge.
Yeah.
But they haven't.
It's been a long ongoing frustration for people who generate some of their own electricity, need access, guaranteed access to net metering, and would like to be able to get clean or local sources for the rest of their generation and have not been able to shop for it. That's good to hear. That's good. Thanks. Okay, one more. Do you generate your, do you have solar?
They use strictly solar and wind. They don't use any,
And does your net metering work fine? That's clean choice? It's good to know. Good. All right, that's all I can say. One more.
This is in regard to the fellow who's off-grid, who's concerned about his starting amps on his heat pump, ground source heat pump. Your starting amps on any motor is 125% of the running amps. So I don't think you have a whole lot of problem with the starting amps. What you have a problem is, how are you going to run a ground source heat pump compressor off of batteries for more than an hour or two?
Yeah, yeah, that's what Bill has done successfully at the North installation that he was talking about. So you guys can talk about that some more offline. If you are interested in geothermal and with battery backup, and Bill has done one of those installations, it can help with those parameters and how that works. Thanks for your comment. All right, great to see everybody. Thank you for coming out. I'm going to miss you in November and December. Have good holidays. Watch us for online. We'll be sending a few things out. I hope you'll stick around and have some snacks and chat with one another. Bill Zimmerman is over there. We are, as you know, Maria, we try to do everything we can as free and open doors as possible. We're supported by our members. We try to keep our costs low, but we certainly appreciate, we would count on your support, actually. So if you're not a member and like to check in with Bill, he can help you understand how that would work. And there's a little module up here if anybody wants to poke around with one. And here's a microinverter if anybody wants to check this out too. So thank you very much.